Once the small group was safely away, the two behind us slinked back to their house. We reserved judgment should they decide to be more moderate later. With a silent nod to ourselves, we remembered to not tell them we told them so when their comrades failed to return. They went off alone, and only one made it back. He didn't want to talk about what happened, and we suspected that he left his friends to die in order to save himself. He went to his house, and we haven't seen him since. We heard he ended up resenting the two that stayed, as if they could have somehow helped, and that was that. The security group had collectively decided that we wanted to send patrols outside the perimeter, but we just flat out didn't have the people. The patrols possibly could have made the surrounding areas a tiny bit safer, but it would have been at the expense of the subdivision's safety. Our entire security team only had the maximum numbers to do one or the other, but not both, so we all had agreed to stay. The decision unfortunately hadn't helped anyone get over the normalcy bias. We all respectfully planted some rose starts outside each of their houses, but couldn't think of much else to do. On their porches and the doors, we used dried up flowers, or the kids made cutout ones. We promised we would plant more flowers in the spring, but inwardly wondered if we would last that long. There hadn't been any animals in any of the now empty houses except for goldfish, which needed food and their tanks swapped out with clean water more often now that their oxygen pumps stopped working. The prior owners had been out of fish food, but someone who used to have fish decided to visit the house daily with a bit of fresh water from the creek and fish chow. In the spring, they could be moved outside, and we heard someone had started digging an enormous fish pond in a piece of yard that nothing else would grow in. Everyone else had stayed inside the perimeter since we lost those folks. We had gardens and chickens and everything, but it was really too cold for the gardens to produce yet. The homes with the chickens and roosters stopped eating the eggs for a bit, so we could get enough little chickies for everyone to get started as they put more and more chicken fencing up. The winters had been getting progressively nastier, and we had to deal with snowfall several times in the last 6 weeks. We joked around and called it global warming. That irritated some people, but we got so tired of having it rammed down our throats prior to the collapse that it never got old. So I was getting ready to go to work, aka security detail. I got done putting my warmest clothes on that I had. I had a chest rig that a friend had given me. It didn't carry armor plates, but it had pouches for 6 AR mags and 5 pistol mags. Unable to shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen, I had sold the last of my belongings worth anything prior to the collapse. AR prices were down, and was able to get myself a very good mid-range AR and completely deck it out with everything I'd wanted. It was very affordable at the time I bought it, and even though there were really great budget ARs, this mid-range one was really good. It had a collapsible stock and stubby foregrip that fit my hand just right. My AR also had a budget red dot sight that was actually surprisingly good. I could flick the color from red to green depending on the background. I usually chose red, but it was nice to have choices depending on the contrast. It also had a sling that was mounted on the side instead of below. This allowed me to have my rifle naturally hang instead of always wanting to be upside down. I reminded myself I needed to find some Velcro so I could truly get it to hang off the side like it was supposed to. It had turned out that I bought only one side of the Velcro, and it was sticky to boot, which didn't help it swivel like it was supposed to. The package lay half open until I could find the right type, or maybe trade or something, since this type was useful to hang light objects on surfaces as needed. I had my single stack 9mm sidearm. The 5 spare mags for it sat in my chest rig somewhat loosely. I could strap them down enough, though, to where they weren't at risk from flying out. I did need to upgrade to a double stacked 9mm somehow because of the capacity. My single stack had to make do for now. Between all of my mags for 9mm, I had 40 rounds. About half were hollow points and half were balls, since I never knew I'd be up against, and self-defense ammo had always been triple the price of ball. That was 2 9-round mags and 3 7-round mags and 1 in the chamber. There were double-stacked 9mm on the market that could carry that much in 2 mags. The guys on my team said they would keep an eye out for me, but were proud that I was as prepared as I was. Behind my pistol mags on my rig was my AR mags. My AR mags held 30 rounds apiece, which was normal capacity for 5.56 by 45 ammo. I usually put in 29 though, so they didn't jam. I could comfortably hold 6 mags, which gave me 180 rounds on my chest, and another 30 on the 7th mag in my AR. That sounded like a lot of ammo, but in a firefight you can easily burn through all that much in a minute or so. The idea is to either hold out for backup or use that ammo to get to the main ammunition storage to keep fighting. In a fighting load, there were people that carried as many as 8 or 10 magazines if they were going for 5.56 by 45. That brought you a little more flexibility, but you didn't want to carry that much all the time. It helped to know what situation you're actually running into, so 6 mags was generally a safe number as long as you had help and a resupply nearby. I finished suiting up and put on my winter hat and checked my cat's water and food and kissed her on the forehead. She liked that and headbutted me in the chin, then squawked at me. I tousled her hair a little bit and then remembered I needed to grab my radio. It was sitting in its little cradle staying charged. My radio used almost no power and took up almost no power at all to charge. I'd had this battery backup system for when we used to get really bad storms. The plug port going into the system had become loose, so it was difficult to charge. A mechanic tinkerer friend in the group had fixed it for me. I could charge this unit up off any 125 volt 15 amp wall stall outlet, which a lot of vehicles came with these days, so one day another group was letting their mobile command center idle that had passed through, and they let me charge my storm survival system up in there. Up until that point, I'd just been charging little by little in people's vehicles that had the outlet built in. That was enough to keep it going and thus keep my radio going. I'd need to find my own inverter and charge controller though someday. In the meantime, this solution was great to get the unit back up to full charge though. That would keep my radio charged for years. The unit had a wall stall outlet port on it too, which was one of the reasons why it was so useful. The radio's cradle also had a light on it, as did the power adapter, so I always knew when it was charging and charged. It also blinked furiously if for some reason I put the radio in the cradle wrong, so it was a pretty fail-safe system. I had the radio equipment and storm machine set on my tote full of survival magazines. If I ever had to bug out, this is all that I need to come with me as long as there was room. Chapter 2. Heading to the command post. Pre-dawn, day 1. I grabbed my radio and set out, locking my door as I went. It was still dark out, and I felt for where my radio was and turned it on. I heard the radio talking in my ear, letting me know the settings it was currently set at, while I checked to make sure I had the volume right to not blow my ear out of my head if someone calmed in. Everything was good, and I walked to our command post, which was at the far entrance of the subdivision. We had the command post located at the far entrance because it was insulated by our other checkpoint. The near checkpoint was closest to the larger roads. As I passed the near checkpoint, I got flashed by a flashlight. That meant someone was trying to far recognition. I stopped and faced where I thought the light was coming from and raised my flashlight. I still had my regular flashlight, so the way I did far recognition was to turn the flashlight on and cover the light to make sure to make the required strobe signal. I did the required signal back to them, moving my hand in front and then away from the light. They did the right signal back, and that meant everything was good to go. If that had gone wrong, they were supposed to take defensive positions and give me orders to stop, then blast me if I didn't comply. I made my way to the far command post, technically the southern of the two command posts, and got flashed again. I did a different recognition pattern since I was at the other command post. I got the responding pattern and safely made my way to the command post. Our subdivision leader was there. He worked an odd shift to the rest of us, where he was up a little earlier for the pre-dawn handoff and then did the carryover to do the daytime group. In turn, he'd sleep for a little bit and do the same thing for the dusk handoff. I found an empty post and stood at it until he came and got me. Our lead confirmed that I was doing dawn patrol today and told me he would be going with me. We went in groups of 2 and pushed our perimeter out a little bit. I'd be going north with a guy and another group would go south. This was to touch base with the next perimeter group. It wasn't managed by us, but we worked in cooperation with them.